rocked. So just a quick reminder to like, share, subscribe. If you don't mind, it'd really be appreciated if you find that any of this stuff has been helpful to you. So I wanted to talk today about, I was talking the other day about the story of Rocky Balboa and Sylvester Stallone. So I'm going to read a little bit to you because I think it's super interesting, and it applies to so many aspects in so many areas of life and sales that I think it was very relevant. So for anybody that doesn't know, of course, the famous, sequence of movies for Rocky Balboa, Sylvester Stallone. So just so you know, you have an idea, he actually had an interview with Tony Robbins, and he told his story. He talked about wanting to be a movie actor since he was a kid, and he wanted to inspire and impact people, and he wanted to be like at the top. Of course, it's not easy to become an actor, right? So it was a really, really big struggle for Sylvester Stallone to become who he is today. And if you haven't heard his story, he took so many no's in the face. He got rejected so many times. He actually applied to over 1,500 agencies, and to each one of them, he went between 1 and 7 times. So he got rejected almost 10,000 times from the same 1,500 different places over the course of 2 or 3 years. People would cuss him out. They would tell him he's ugly, that he kind of speaks funny, and that he would never make it in the acting world. So just imagine, hearing that. So think about how many people would have given up just because they've actually said or tried something 1,500 times and repeated that over and over and over for a course of a few years. Outside of that, you have to include that he had absolutely no money. He had less than $25 in his account. He had no money to buy food, and everybody kept telling him to get a real job. So Tony Robbins asked him, hey, so why don't you use... Tony was kind of trying to pull on this interview, if you can YouTube it. Tony was trying to pull the mindset by asking questions, a very good question. And he asks, Sylvester, why didn't you just actually get a job? I mean, it made logical sense to go get a regular job if you didn't have any money and you've got rejected so much. Why did you not do that? And he said,
I was starving, by the way. He said, I couldn't pay for even to have heat in my apartment. My wife was screaming at me every day to go get a job. I said, well, why didn't you? He said, because I knew that if I got a job, he said, I'd get seduced back and I'd lose my hunger. He said, I knew that the only way I could do this is if it was the only choice, if I burned all other bridges. Because if I did a normal job, pretty soon I'd be caught up in that rhythm and that stuff, and I'd feel okay about my life, and I feel like my dream would just gradually disappear. He said, I wanted to keep that hunger. That hunger was the only thing I thought was my advantage.
And I think that's such a winner type response to where, a lot of times there's always going to be other options to go through or focus on something else. But the real, true hard thing that you want to do requires for you to only do that and only focus on that one thing until it's there. And I think, people, even when they're poor and nobody knew about Sylvester Stallone, he already had that mindset. He said he wanted to keep his PhD. And for anybody that's thinking about a degree, PhD meaning poor, hungry, and determined. And he understood that being poor, being determined, and being hungry was actually his competitive advantage. Excuse me, was actually what was going to, separate him from the crowd. And so he was explaining to Tony, he actually got an offer. And he went back to an agency, and he kind of stayed for 2 nights in a row, sleeping at this agency, people driving him crazy. And the guy at the agency ended up telling him, dude, I'll give you something. Just leave us alone. And he said, hey, I'll give you an offer to where you can go get beat up at this movie for 30 seconds. For 30 seconds, somebody's going to just beat you up, and you can be in the movie. And they told him, hey, if you can get beat up, so maybe we'll let you be in there. He did that for 3 movies, and it led him nowhere. He still had no money, had to find a way to get at least food for his wife and for himself. And so one of the worst ideas he ever had, probably to this day, he went to his wife's jewelry box, and he sold all of his wife's jewelry, which she was not excited about. He also had to sell his dog, which he sold for $25. Can you imagine? Just imagine having to sell your dog for $25. That's insane. So he said it was probably the worst day of his life, and he didn't give up because he still had a dream. At the time, it was winter in New York, which is extremely cold, and he was freezing, had no money to pay for heat, so he kind of went to the library, not to read, but just to kind of get warm. And when he got there, he ended up reading a book that a guy left on the table. It was the Poems of Poe, and he kind of got inspired by that. He knew he was very far from reaching his goal. So reading this book, nothing really changed. He went home. He saw a fight of probably the best boxer in history, Muhammad Ali. He got into it, super inspired, and so he kept pushing and kept pushing. Instead of writing a script for the movie, he thought, maybe I just need to write a script for my own movie. So he wrote a script for 20 hours straight. And then he went again, agency to all the places he got rejected. And everybody laughed at his face. He kept going, didn't get discouraged, and he finally found somebody. You think about how many years this has been. And somebody gave him a six-figure offer, $125,000 for the script to not be in the movie. Sylvester said, hey, the only catch on this script is I have to be in it, and I have to be the star. The agency said, no way. And I want you to stop right there and think, like, what would you have done at that point, right? Like, your wife's probably divorcing you. You had to sell your dog for $25. You're, like, going to libraries just for warmth. And you have no money, you make a script and they offer you $125,000. Like, everyone would take that. And he still said no because he was so focused on it had to be his own movie. So he left. And luckily for him, the agency called him back because they really wanted the script and they offered him $35,000. So they dropped the offer by $90,000. They offered him $35,000. And they told him, hey, you kind of look ugly. You talk kind of funny. So that's why the offer's only $35,000 for you to be the star. And the script for the movie was called Rocky Balboa. So just imagine. I mean, of course, that's the beginning of everything you probably know about Sylvester Stallone already. But $35,000 for the sale. And he was a star for Rocky Balboa, the first movie. The first thing he did with his money is he went back to the liquor store where he sold his dog and waited for days until the owner showed up again with the dog. He said he would buy it back. And the guy didn't want to sell the dog back. He had to end up offering $15,000 and a role in the movie for him to get his dog back. So he gave it away for $25 and had to pay $15,000 back to get it. And so... And so I want you to think about, like, some of the takeaways on Rocky's story, right, on Sylvester's story. And of course, even today, 2025, like, I still see on Netflix, Sylvester Stallone, the life and the day in the life of Sylvester Stallone, his family. He's got, I think, 4 daughters, and he got a beautiful family, and he's done way many more movies than just Rocky. And when I just get so inspired, I get so happy and so passionate just thinking about, not necessarily Sylvester Stallone, but every single one of you have actually a story like that inside of you. And it's very easy to quit and go do something normal and let the world influence you. But Sylvester Stallone at one point was a guy that was just broke with $25. How many people do you know that have $25 or less, or even less than $100? So they live paycheck to paycheck, and they have a dream like that, and they could be Rocky Balboa, because Rocky Balboa one day was just one guy getting rejected in New York with a script that talked a little funny and looked a little weird, and had to sell his dog at a liquor store for $25. And that guy became Rocky Balboa. And of course, those 4 movies were, like, they're still an icon today on just, American theater and American, even American history, right? And, like, the story, the inspiration, the beating himself up, the boxing, it probably marked, like, a whole era, just like Star Wars did, or like all these other movies did, right? It's probably like one of the most Americana things you can do is, 4th of July and watch Rocky. It's almost like a thing, right? And I get so inspired because I look at every person that I talk to, every person that I have the opportunity to coach or guide, or even for myself. I look at myself and on my life and I'm like, man, if I could have just like a Rocky story, or if I could just like keep chasing this dream, if I could just keep chasing it, and understanding that you're going to get rejected 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 times. That's why I love door-to-door sales, is because it's going to accelerate the process in which you're going to get rejected, which if you ever wanted to, have a dream so big like Rocky did or like Sylvester did, you're going to need the rejection. And even if you don't have that big of dreams, but you still have all the rejection, it's going to help you and it's going to move you forward. And a lot of times people say, well, I can't afford it. And I always like to reverse the questions like, well, can you afford to stay where you are? I got somebody today that's saying that they were in a financial struggle and whatever, and they were going to feel a little bad and they were going to stay home instead of coming to work. And I said, hey, if you were in a financial struggle and you feel just a little bit bad, it doesn't sound like it's the end of the world. Why would you not just go work? And why would you not like push a little bit through the challenge of feeling a little maybe, unhealthy or a little sick and be able to go, like, you got to work and push for your goals. It's a lot easier to stay home and never get rejected, but then nothing ever really gets accomplished, right? And I think I look at Sylvester Stallone, I think he would have done what we do in our business. He would have been great because he had the mindset. He had the PhD. I look at Sylvester Stallone, if he would have gone into sports, he would have done great because he had the PhD. He never gave up. He always tried again. And he didn't listen to the critics. And so for anybody out there that maybe it's your family, and by the way, your family loves you. Their form of love sometimes is to protect you from what they think is bad, which could be some risk they never took. That could be, though, the door, the access to your dreams, but your parents might protect you from it because in their head, it is good. That is their form of love. And it's not a bad thing. They just don't know. And maybe it's your friends. Maybe it's your wife, your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend. Like, sometimes you're going to hear the biggest and heaviest critics from the people you love the most. And is that not their role? To protect you? Again, they're just not doing it the way. They're not doing it the right way, but that sometimes is their way. And sometimes you have to accept it. You got to learn to live with it and still push. Because what would we do in a country without Rocky Balboa? What would we do? What movies would we watch? Like, the world wouldn't be the same if it wasn't for that story. I'm so thankful to, of course, Sylvester and for everybody that follows a path like that. Like, my biggest inspiration is to find people that are not known, the average person that just turns their life to be extraordinary because the amount of action, the amount of volume, the amount of repetition, the amount of rejection they're willing to go through, that is, to me, the most inspiring thing, more than a wedding, more than anything. It's seeing somebody get pushed down, rejected over and over and over, and never, never, never back down. It is the only way to guarantee success, is to never, ever, ever, ever back down and quit. So hopefully you get something from the story. Hopefully I inspired you to watch Rocky's movies in a little bit, and we'll see you at the next one.